Hello, and welcome to the Brave New Weed podcast. And now, here's your host, Joe Dolce.
Welcome to the Brave New Weed podcast, folks. These are high-minded conversation for the post-prohibition era. I'm Joe Dolce, your host. Matthew Hendershot is my co-host. Matthew, welcome back from Prague. How are you?
I'm doing great. It was a nice little, just tourist-based trip to a place I had never been before, and a fun little experience visiting the Czech Republic.
It's a beautiful place, Prague. Tell me the most interesting or curious thing you came across while there.
Oh, man, I saw so many interesting and curious things, but I think for the purposes of our show and our listeners, one of the things was the prevalence of cannabis and CBD cannabis specifically all over the city. Prague is sort of littered with these mini markets where you can go in and buy, a beer or some liquor or a snack or something like that. And almost every one of these had a massive display of whole flower cannabis that was high CBD, less than 0.3% THC strains that were just available for purchase. And at one point, I even found a street-side coin-operated vending machine where you could buy CBD cannabis flower by the gram.
To me, that is a nightmare. I mean, to me, that is like the worst thing you could ever have. Like, how old must the cannabis be in those vending machines? It's a vending machine.
It is a vending machine.
Like, even when I smoked cigarettes 100 years ago, you would never even buy a packet of cigarettes from a vending machine because they were always ancient. So the idea of that sounds like maybe the most dystopian future of cannabis that I can imagine.
Yeah, I don't know that that's necessarily the direction we want to go as far as the vending machines and as far as quality of product and everything like that.
It is not. But it is not. And let me use that opportunity to tease this episode, please, because our guest this episode is this great guy called Narbe Alexandrian, who runs capital. It's called Canopy Rivers, and it's the venture capital affiliate of Canopy Growth, which is the world's largest cannabis company. So Narbe has this very privileged position of really being able to see all the things that are coming in cannabis because everybody wants to sell him the next big idea. And he's going to talk to us about some of the things he's been able to peek at about and what the future of cannabis looks like. So it's a great interview, and I'm very happy to have him on the show. So this episode is brought to us by the fine folks at Firefly Vaporizers, who have just recently released the new Firefly 2 Plus. Matthew, have you been using your Firefly 2 Plus?
I have, and it's great. Anyone who is like a device head, and I'm a big tech guy. I love being able to like produce podcasts and take great videos and take great pictures. And I'm attached to my Android phone, and I've dabbled in iPhones, and this thing just sort of fits into this device-heavy world that we kind of live in because it's sleek and sexy and easily usable, and it's a really nice thing to have with you and to carry around. It's cool, and it's a conversation starter because they're beautiful. And
it also really works well. I mean, the flow on this thing is easy. It's an easy draw. It preserves the material. You're not you get everything that you vaporize. There's nothing going up in smoke, which is really useful. And I think something else that's interesting, we've been hearing a lot about e-cigarettes and cannabis oils and cigarette oils. And Firefly 2 is, in a way, it's a little old school because you're actually vaporizing flower. And I like that. And I also like that it is built from these premium materials. These are like medical grade materials that are not going to burn or in any way put any toxins into the body or the lungs. The vapor you're using is really clean and really as good as it can be. And I think that's really important. It also, the other thing I like about Firefly is that it uses this technology called dynamic convection heating, which means you never burn the flower. And that's, to me, one of the great things because, the other kind of vaporizers, conduction vaporizers, it really, at a certain point, you're burning flower. It tastes nasty. And I just don't want to be.
It starts to get that like burnt popcorn taste.
Yeah, and I just don't want to. I don't want to burn things and then put them into my lungs. I really like the fact that when I use my Firefly, I know what I'm vaping. I know that it's quality product made with quality materials, and I think given what's going on, it's really important to be aware of what you're using, what you're putting in it, and how it's working in the body. I think it really matters. So I would say that Firefly 2 is a high fidelity way to vaporize cannabis. And thank you again for sponsoring us. It really helps us keep the lights on and keep going.
Also, for any listeners and supporters of the show that would be interested in purchasing a Firefly 2 Plus, you can navigate to thefirefly.com, and on the purchase of any one single device, you can enter the coupon code BRAVE to receive a discount of 20% off just for being a fan of the Brave New Weed podcast.
I think that's a $50 discount, so that's a pretty nice deal. Is there any news you want to talk about, Matthew, before we get into the show?
Well, there is some news that I'd like to talk about, and it's kind of on the some of the stuff that we were just mentioning, which is just to update our listeners on what is going on with this whole vaping-related illness wave that seems to be going over the United States. The count of fatalities has now gone up to 7 deaths that have been linked to vaping-related illnesses. And it seems to be that a thread of commonality, and I'll say that this is correlation and not necessarily causality yet, but a common thread has been found in this black market additive, vitamin E acetate, which is used to actually thicken the viscosity of the oil. So far, 380 cases of severe illness have been reported across 36 states in the United States. And deaths have been reported in Kansas, Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, Oregon, and California. So it's pretty prevalent as a problem all across the United States. It even led New York State to ban the sale of e-cigarettes for 90 days, like all across the board, to see if they can stem this problem from growing anymore.
Well, it's a nasty substance. This vitamin E acetate. You're basically putting an oil into your lungs, right?
That's right. It doesn't break down properly after it's been ingested into your system, and it sort of reforms itself into globules of oil inside the user's lungs and leads to what's called lipoid pneumonia, which is very, very dangerous and at times can be fatal.
Oh, it sounds terrible. And also, you got to remember, the lungs are hydrophilic. They are water-based. So oil and water do not mix ever. So folks, word to the wise again, know what you're putting in your body. And, for a while, maybe avoid those vapor cigarettes for a bit.
There's a lot to be said about definitely not shopping on the black market, because you're getting sub-quality mechanics inside those vaporizers at times. Who knows what sort of additives there, and there's just zero regulation. There was a lot of to-do that came up around a story of a death in Oregon where this guy's vapor cartridges was a THC cartridge, and it was linked back to a legal dispensary. And through some research, I was able to find that the Oregon law doesn't actually require even legal dispensaries to test for vitamin E oil currently. So they're looking at working on getting that changed as fast as possible. But you got to be careful out there, folks. If you're gonna buy oils to vape, make sure you know what you're getting. Make sure you're checking the ingredients. Make sure it's from a legal dispensary and not from the black market. And if you have any doubt whatsoever, just don't vape. Don't vape oils. Get your Firefly back out or some other dry herb vape and stick to the 1:1:1 of fresh, clean herb, a nice, simple way of ingestion, and your direct relation to your high in your body.
Thank you, Dr. Hendershot, for that.
No, not a doctor. Definitely not.
Thank you very much. Before we start, I just want to say one more thing, which is that I got a note first of all, I love when you listeners write to us.
Oh, yeah, it's the best.
And even though we don't get enough of them, I love seeing it. So I got this great note the other day from Daniel Stein, MD, that said, after listening to your interview with Alain Blatt, I pursued and recently launched a strategic partnership with Neomedic. Patients in Florida can now avail themselves of the high success rate that decades of clinical experience can provide. Your work, our work, that's us, Matthew, has an important multiplier effect on education and patient care. Every day is an opportunity to teach and promote wellness, and every conversation now seems high-minded. Thank you. So I love that he wrote, and I called him up and I interviewed him to sort of understand what his connection with Neometic is and how it happened. So there's a very brief interview that you're now going to hear with Dr. Dan Stein, who's the owner of Neurology of Cannabis in Sarasota, Florida. Hi, Dan. Thanks for joining.
Hey, Joe.
It was very nice of you to reach out to us when you heard that episode on Neometic. Can you tell us what ended up happening when you heard it, and what prompted you to what it prompted you to do?
I was inspired. I heard about the success that Neometic had out in California, and of course their history beginning in Israel. And I was inspired to reach out to Elon and ask him if he could help me help my patients here in Sarasota. And so I called him, and he picked up the phone and was very interested in talking with me about what we were doing here and potentially how we could put together a strategic partnership.
Can you be a little more specific? Like, what are you doing there, and how might they be helping you?
Well, I'm a general neurologist here now 26 years in Sarasota. I still have a general neurology practice. I'm board certified. And I see all manner of neurologic illness that has been now often treated with cannabis. We opened a cannabis clinic about 2 years ago. And now every afternoon we see patients, not just neurological patients, but other patients in our community for cannabis therapy in the afternoons, general neurology in the morning. So we're quite busy, and our learning curve is very steep. We just started 2 years ago, and so there's a lot to learn, in terms of practical, provide practical information about how to get patients to where they need to be using the products that are available.
Dan, what exactly are the neurological conditions you're treating?
Well, it's a wide range, Joe. We see everything from degenerative illnesses like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's dementia. We see acute injuries, brain injury, and stroke. We see other conditions like epilepsy, migraine. Pain is very common, is a very common complaint, not just headache, but also back and neck pain. Earlier today, I saw someone with involuntary muscle spasm of the head called torticollis, where they couldn't relax their neck muscles and their head was in a fixed position.
Oh, sounds agonizing.
It is. And it's difficult to treat with conventional therapy. So the neuromuscular system and the brain and spine are all part of the neurological system that unfortunately goes awry.
Yeah. So have you figured out or learned in what ways cannabis is really treating this? Or has the Neometic model been able to enlighten you into some ways about that you didn't expect?
The Neometic model has been helpful with the nuts and bolts of getting therapy to patients and monitoring them carefully for response. It hasn't really been helpful in terms of of me learning more about the biochemistry of it. It's more of a practical type of thing. Neometic has a robust case management service, and that's really, I think, what they do best. They have all these data points from all the thousands of patients they've treated here and in Israel. But I think really that what they're helping me most with is following up with the patient, calling them several times a week, designing a treatment program based on the available therapies here in Sarasota. So it's more of the practical case management aspect of medical care that they're helping me with.
Got it. We created a course called Medical Cannabis Mentor called Cannabis Therapeutics. You might find some of the information in there helpful or in understanding how it may be working and also some dosing protocols. Have you had a chance to look at it?
I have. I knew you were going to ask me that today, Joe, so I looked at it over lunch today.
Oh, isn't that clever? Was that a shameless self-promotion on my part?
Well, let me take it a step further. I thought it was very well produced. You know, the graphics, the videos, the text, it all looks very professional. I'm impressed. And I am familiar with much of that information you presented, but I believe my staff could really benefit from looking at it more carefully.
Anytime you're ready. And listen, if you have information that you can contribute to us in creating those courses, we'd love to know. We've gleaned some of the best clinical expertise we can find, but there aren't that many people treating with cannabis meds. And it would be really valuable if you have expertise or data or anything you're collecting that we could use. We'd love to be in touch with you about that.
I would love to share. One of the reasons I felt comfortable reaching out to Elon at Neometic is because in medicine, we have to teach each other. We're obligated to teach each other. I had a medical student here with me today who probably knows more about cannabis medicine than any of her fellow students. It's part of the Hippocratic Oath. And so when it comes to learning things about a new field like this, it's new again, I guess, for us. It's important to be available. And so I will take you up on that offer, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Dan, tell the listeners the name of your clinic, where it's located, how they can get in touch with you.
We are the Neurology of Cannabis Clinic here in Sarasota, Florida. You can find us online, neurologyofcannabis.com. Our phone number is 941-400-1211. And our email is info@neurologyofcannabis.com.
Final question is, do you have to be a Florida resident to participate in your program?
You have to be a Florida resident or a seasonal resident. We have a lot of snowbirds, we call them here. And so if you reside in Florida for over a month every year, you would qualify.
That's fantastic. Dan, thank you so much for reaching out, and thank you so much for talking to us and letting us know about your program. It's really important. Keep going.
You're welcome, Joe. Thanks for calling.
Listeners, I want to personally thank you all. The Brave New Weed podcast is now bigger and more popular and more widely consumed than ever before. And that's because of all of you. But we don't want to stall out now, and we want to continue to grow. So we have one simple ask. If you love the show, share it with one other person who you may know, who may benefit, or has a curiosity and just wants to learn more. Your act of sharing with just one person can help us continue to grow, and by that growth, continue to bring you all of the best news, commentary, interviews, features, and more right here on the Brave New Weed podcast.
I'm very pleased to introduce Narbe Alexandrian to you. He runs the venture capital firm called Canopy Rivers, that's an affiliate of Canopy Growth, the world's largest cannabis company based in Canada. Before he joined Canopy, he worked in the tech industry in Canada. Before that, he was a senior strategy manager at TELUS, Internet of Things Group, where he launched a lot of go-to-market products and strategies. He made the move to cannabis when he saw the parallels of what was happening in this industry to the tech industry. So in other words, this guy is young and smart. And I just want to tell you that some of Canopy's acquisitions include Headset, which is the first real-time data and analytics service for the industry. And we're going to be having them on the show in the near future. Civilized, the media lifestyle brand that talks about modern cannabis culture and reaches about 2 million visitors a month. And AgriFarm, which owns a greenhouse seed company, which is one of the most preeminent global providers of cannabis genetics to date. So please welcome Narbe Alexandrian. Hi, Narbe.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm going all right. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking Recess. It's a CBD drink based out of New York. I wanted to check it out, see what it was all about.
And how many milligrams of CBD are in this drink? I'm very curious.
That's a good question. I think it's, if It's a very low dosage. Actually, they don't even write it on the package, which is quite the shame.
Are you serious?
Yeah. That's weird.
That is one of the things that really bugs me about all this CBD stuff. It's such crap. They can't tell you what's in it. They can't tell you what's in it, for one thing. They don't bother. And then they don't tell you how much of what it is that's in it or maybe in it is. Drives me crazy. Does it bother you?
Absolutely. I think I was speaking to someone about how in the Navy right now, they allow CBD, but they don't allow THC. But some of the CBD products you buy, you have no idea how much THC is in it. And with trace amounts, they could be dishonorably kicked out.
They just made it so that you're not allowed to consume CBD products in the Navy also. Do you know why?
Why is that?
Because some CBD is full spectrum, and it does have 0.3%, which is the most negligible amount of THC you could ever have in anything in it. And they are afraid that even if you do consume that, you might test positive on a piss test, which is a distinct possibility given the annoyingness of piss tests.
We've talked to so many breathalyzer companies that are trying to use nanotechnology to understand what that threshold is. Just like when you drive, they say you can't have more than 0.05% alcohol in your system. Same situation on the THC side. They don't understand it. So because of the metabolism and how different we are, you could test positive, but you haven't smoked a J for call it 2 weeks, and I could test negative, and I spoke 2 days ago, and they just don't have the science to back that up. So law enforcement's in a frenzy right now, and I think that's probably one of the things that might be holding back federal legalization in the U.S.
I think that's one of the things. I think it's one of the excuses. Let's put it that way. I mean, it's not really I don't think it's a major problem based on the stats of all sorts of states. But before we go further, please tell our audience who you are. Tell them your name and what you do.
Absolutely. My name is Narbe Alexandrian. I am the president and CEO of Canopy Rivers, the venture capital affiliate of Canopy Growth. For your listeners, that means what we do is we invest small amounts of money into investments within companies across the world in the cannabis space, look at them grow, and hopefully exit them through an acquisition or through a go public event.
So how much money are you responsible for or juggling, or do you have to play with now as this vaunted position of this job?
Yeah, so we've raised $280 million of capital in total, but over the course of a little over 2 years, our rate of our return on invested capital is 5.4 times. So we've 5 times our money, or the $280 million, into value.
Do you want to invest in a podcast?
I'd love to. Your podcast specifically, I'd love to.
All right, listeners, you heard it. Okay. He just said he would. Okay. Wait till he sees the numbers, because there are, Daddy. Okay. So how'd you get this job, and how old are you? You look pretty young.
So I am in my 30s. I got this job through I've been in the tech VC world for quite some time. So I spent the last 10 years working for a large telco, looking at investments in the Internet of Things space. So sensor-based technologies, buying, white labeling, and investing in them. I moved to work for the largest government incubator or startup incubator in Canada. Did that for a year and a half, and then moved into the largest VC fund in Canada and did that for about 4 years prior to making my way over to cannabis. Some of the investments in my past that have been really successful that we've done as a fund was Shopify, Hootsuite, Wave Accounting. These are all billion-dollar plus companies. Well, Wave got sold for about $500 million to H&R Block, but successful companies, and there's 36 other ones that I invested on the tech side. And then moved over to the cannabis space, just seeing the writing on the wall. You had strong entrepreneurs coming in there, a revolutionary plant that is gonna shape the way the world looks at it. Call it 5 years ago into the future. So we have a long ways to go in terms of how it's going to affect people and places. And you had investors which had short-sighted views on it. They talk about how this is going to be a $500 billion industry, but yet they forced companies to go public in 6 months, and it just didn't fit the style of investing that I had seen from the tech world and from Silicon Valley.
So that's are you an oracle?
Definitely not. No.
Okay. But let's that's one of the many things I want to talk about with you. Okay. So one thing is what are you seeing? So you've been doing this for 4 years, 5 years in cannabis. Yes. So what are you seeing, and what's different today from what it was 4 or 5 years ago? Where are things moving from your perspective? Okay, which is, I know, a fairly fast-forwarded perspective. I know we're not talking about the next few months. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I think back then the major difference you would see is in the quality of operators. I remember coming into this industry. I used to call it half business and half ponytails. So there was a lot of folks that were cannabis connoisseurs and they wanted to start a business in it, but you weren't seeing the same sophistication as you would have seen on the tech side. There's not enough thought leadership to teach people how to start a cannabis business. There's not enough people watching out for the entrepreneurs. And it was, quite frankly, illegal in all markets at the point in time. But now that you're looking at the industry, what was a commodity, not a commodity a year ago, which was having a strong entrepreneur coming from the corporate world to start something in cannabis, is now table stakes. So you're seeing executives and entrepreneurs come from all walks of life, but people who have done it before, who have started a business, successfully exited it, and now entering into the cannabis space. So whether that's tech or consumer packaged goods or you name it, it's a very strong following of strong operators.
So, a lot of people say this is such a great thing that entrepreneurs are coming in from the outside. There's really no evidence that this is a great thing, is there?
No, there is no direct correlation between a past success entrepreneur coming into a new business. However, it does de-risk the business a bit. If I was to say that Joe Schmo off the street came up to you and said, I want to start a CBD brand and I need $5 million, you'd question it. But if someone that had exited 2 businesses and sold them for $300 million each comes and says, I want $5 million for a CBD brand, you take them a bit more seriously because they have that past success that they could back off of. So in the venture world, we typically look at 3 things: market size, how big the market's going to be, whether it's niche or you can go mass market, the product market fit of how well that product fits with the consumer's needs. And then thirdly, which is the operators, which is, in my opinion, the most important one. I always say there's no such thing as an eBay for ideas. You can't go buy an idea off of someone else, but you can go buy a business. So it's all about execution, and the only people that can execute are the operators, not the actual idea itself.
Thank you for that. Are venture capitalists big cannabis users? Like people in technology are huge cannabis users, especially coders, which is one thing I learned when I was reporting Brave New Weed, which I thought was really interesting. Like all these, barren sort of jobs, they love to use cannabis because it gives them some sort of crazy focus that it never gives to me. God damn it! But did you find it widely used in the venture world?
I think so. I think especially in the cannabis world, venture capitalists do use it. You need to understand the product. You need to understand the viewpoint of it. So I always say you got to eat the dog food and to really know what it's like. And that's the point.
That's just a terrible thing to say about this plant that we like. Do you eat the dog food?
Definitely do eat the dog food. And I understand all the different parts of it. We were just in San Francisco last week. And we're diving into the beverage. There was a beverage expo, and they had all these beverages. And we went to dispensary, bought a bunch of beverages, and did the whole wine sip and spit type situation because you can't just try 10 different drinks. You just probably go to the hospital or fall asleep, quite frankly, because there's no such thing as an overdose.
You know you're not going to the hospital on that one.
Definitely. So we would do that just to understand the different product, and fell in love with a few products and ended up drinking the entire bottle.
What did you like?
I actually did like the Lagunitas Hi-Fi hops.
I like it too. Yeah, I think it's really good. It's quite subtle, and I don't like sweet drinks, so I could see it appealing, but I think they missed their mark completely. To me, they should be marketing this. It's a hop-infused beverage. There's no carbohydrates. There's no alcohol in it. That's right, yeah. So there's no calories in it. So to me, it is the ultimate beverage, especially for people who are watching their weight, and yet they're marketing it to men because they're Lagunitas. Did you notice this?
I did. I think the distribution actually discredits them as well. Selling through dispensaries is very tough because you're not going after the target market you're aiming for. But after having the drink, me and a colleague of mine were just saying, like, you know what? Anytime you're thinking of a 6-pack of beer, that's about 700 calories. You could go 0 calories and get a different type of appeal to it.
And it feels good. It's a nice buzz, didn't you think?
I thought it was extremely hydrating, and it just felt great.
Hydrating. Spell that.
Hydrating.
Oh, I thought you meant HIGH.
Oh, that's smart.
Go on, you can use that. That's for free.
I'll take that.
But tell me what else you saw that you liked, or that you sampled that you liked in terms of beverages, because people are saying this is the next. It's been a slow category up until recently, I think, and people are really now saying, "Oh, there's all these cannabis-infused wines," and which to me sound disgusting, and obviously things like this terrible drink Recess. But what did you see from California that was interesting?
Honestly, that was the only one that really stuck out to me. I saw a lot of brands out there. They had 100 milligrams, 250 milligrams of THC in it.
Are they kidding? Are they kidding?
I know, definitely. Like it's you take a sip of it, and what are you supposed to carry the rest of the bottle around with you for another 2 weeks and finish it off? They had little markers on the bottle that would tell you how much you're drinking, but it just didn't make sense. The root cause of that is actually how the dispensaries market and sell the product. Right now, dispensaries, if you think about it, they're small. They have limited square footage. Every inch they want to sell THC in. So if a company comes and says, I want to sell a 10 milligram bottle, they'll say, great, it's $5 or $6 or $10 or whatever it is. And they say, well, I'm going to sell a 200 milligram bottle. They said, great, that's $30. Now, for the actual beverage manufacturer, cannabis is such a small portion of the total cost. So your margins are radically different at those price points. So they're paying more for the bottling and the other ingredients than they are together and combined than they are for the actual cannabis.
That's the first time that has made sense to me, because I have seen these 200 milligram THC bottles thinking exactly like what you're thinking. Like, that is a no fun experience unless you've got 10 people or 20 people to share it with. But it's not a social way of consuming at all, is it? It's just like gulp and pass and then go.
Or you have to dilute it with something else. But who wants to buy a cannabis root beer and then buy a normal root beer and then mix them together on the sidewalk to have a sip? It just looks very inadequate. But like, that's why I like Lagunitas so much, is because they nailed it on that 5 to 10 milligram portion. But their brand is the reason why they can enter into the stores and get that shelf space.
Yeah, but yes, as you said, they can only be in dispensaries in California now. I got it. Do you see any other products that you thought were interesting in the so-called hotbed of innovation, California?
Not necessarily products, but I was more so, our focus is on the science side. So we're trying to understand the emulsification technologies behind it. So I've yet to see a company really crack the onset within 5 minutes and offset within an hour, typically like what a beer does to you. So if you're to chug a beer, call it funnel or shotgun it, you're going to feel the effects immediately, but within an hour, it's out of your system. And this is why law enforcement says you should have a beer every single hour or else you can't drive. That's the same scenario that you're looking for on the THC side. I've yet to see that. And I've tried many of the products, and it has that 5 minute onset, but it has like a 3 to 4 hour offset, which basically ruins your night.
But not the Lagunitas. I felt it was gone very quickly. Am I misremembering it?
No, it was gone very quickly, but you're also microdosing, so you're not actually taking the full dosage that you would have normally taken.
It was a 10 milligram bottle or something like that, right? That's my normal dosage, 10 milligrams.
I guess you're lightweight. I'm kidding.
I am such a lightweight. Admittedly so. I'm starting a movement for lightweights. But when you say emulsification, are you talking about stuff that appears in solids like chocolate, or are you talking about even in beverages?
Both. So you're trying to understand how quickly it hits your body and how quickly it gets out of your body, and whether you're digesting it or you're putting it on your tongue or you're putting it as patch, all of them, or you're smoking it. All of them have different times that it takes to onset and then offset. Of course, we know right now that joints are probably the quickest way to offset, because you feel it and then within an hour it's gone. And then you have other forms, which are edibles, which take much longer because your stomach and your liver has to metabolize that out.
That is correct, of course. Did you ever try Binsky chocolate?
No, I haven't.
I tell you, somebody gave me some the other day from California. It's actually the most delicious chocolate with a very nice effect. From one chocolate to another, I can't really tell the difference of the effect so much once you know your dose. Anyway, but the flavor and the taste of this stuff was really good, really impressive. You haven't tried it?
I've heard of it. I haven't tried it. But I think it sounds a lot like what there's a company in California called Defonce, and they do high end chocolates as well. And I've tasted that. It tastes fantastic.
Really nice. So what else? Let's wrap this 1/4 of the show up and tell me what other technologies you saw that or that you've been thinking about that have really sort of captured your mind or your imagination, if anything.
Tech on the beverage and
any aspect of the cannabis business. This is your game. You're in that game. I want your front row view of it.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's really missing is on the data side. So last year we were in MJ Biz and we're walking the exhibit floor and we tried the drink of what is the second largest beverage manufacturer in the cannabis space. Which is? Not going to name the name because of how the story is going to play out. But we tasted a product of theirs. It was a blueberry cola, very artificial, extremely sweet. Didn't understand why they made it. So when we asked them how they came up with the drink, they said they had this fantastic relationship with a Kentucky-based flavor house, and they gave them the flavor, put in THC, now it's selling off the shelves. To me, that was completely opposite from all the meetings that I've had with the CPG companies all around the world that are looking at the CBD or THC space, because they take about 2 years to really do their homework before they create a product. So then I asked myself, what's really missing in this industry? And it's data. There's no data around understanding what consumers like, their trends, what flavors are selling, and what's really coming off the shelf. So we started to talk through with Nielsen to try to understand if they had the data set. They said they didn't at the time. And then we started diving in deep into every single cannabis data company that we could bump into. And all of them like to talk to us because we have the Canopy name attached to it, and they all talk about what they do, what their secret sauce is, where they get the data from. And we kept bumping into Headset. And Headset was a company that's based out of Seattle. It's the three co-founders of Leafly, which is the most successful technology cannabis exit in history today. And right after they were done their earnout, they made Headset, which takes data from 20 point of sales or POS providers, puts them together and gives an aggregate view of what's actually happening within the mature markets within the US. That to me is a very strong path for any CPG company that wants to understand what to create next, what's selling, what ratio of CBD to THC products are coming off the shelf, and where the holes are in each of the geographies where they can create and innovate new products.
Just so you know, listener, CPG means consumer packaged goods. It's anything that comes in a box, basically, with a pretty design on the outside of it. We say that's accurate?
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So did you buy a Headset?
We invested in them. So again, we're minority investors. So we invested in them in December of last year. So it's been very successful. We've been really happy with the outcome.
You're one of the unusual guests on this podcast, Narbe, because you actually contacted us to say, hey, I like your podcast, which is not that common for people who want to be on this. I didn't know if you wanted to be on the show when you wrote. You just sort of said that, which was very nice. What prompted you to do that? I'm gonna ask for a little joy here, a little love.
Well, I know about your book. I actually have a copy on my desk, and I heard the podcast and I really liked it. And I just wondered what we could talk about and how cool it would be if we were just to jump on air together and just shoot the shit and just talk about different things of cannabis. You're a big connoisseur. You have some amazing guests on the show, and I'm personally a huge fan of what you've developed here, and I'm grateful to be on the show.
That's very nice. I'm so glad. Thank you. I sometimes feel like we do this into a black hole of nothingness, right? Even though we have, some sort of listener feedback, it's better than the old days, but sometimes you just feel like you're doing it. Nobody really listens. You're just sort of doing it for yourself, which in fact I am, but I'm glad you found some value in it.
Absolutely. And I think that goes for many entrepreneurs out there. You just need to give without an expectation of what you're going to get back. And over time, the snowball effect rewards everybody.
When does that snowball effect kick in?
I think it's kicked in for you already, but
you have no idea, man. Authoring and podcasting, this is not the way to the heights, okay? I do want to talk to you about an episode we ran a few episodes ago, excuse the repetition, the one that was called Tie Stick, and it was really about it was about a lot of things, actually. I think Jim Plamondon is really brilliant, really smart guy, comes from the tech business, has moved to Thailand to try to help small farmers do small cultivation of really sort of landrace and heirloom strains. Those of us who are old enough remember Tie Stick very fondly. Have you ever had any experience of Tie Stick?
I've never experienced it, but just listening to that podcast makes me want to experience it.
Okay, so good. So I think it's quite interesting because he said some things that I know you had some issue with, and I want to discuss them. And I think I know what his response would be. So I'm going to play Jim for a little bit, and you're going to be you, and we're going to discuss this, okay? Because I think this is really really these are big moves coming forward with biosynthetics, which is a new name for really genetic modification. I know, and how this is going to happen and play out. So let's talk about it a little bit. So, you very wisely sort of synthesized some of the stuff in that conversation. One of the things was that, cultivation it's very expensive right now in North America. Jim's contention is that, anywhere where it's sunny most of the year and hot is going to beat by a long shot places where things are grown in greenhouses at enormous environmental and energy costs. Okay. So, one of his things is we as small farmers, we being Thailand, can produce this material at a far lower price. I think he was saying something like 13 cents a gram, as opposed to, I think, what's currently costing $7 something a gram in Canada.
So the $7 and something is actual price point. That actually costs much less. You're looking at around $3 per gram for the Canadian producers. Okay. But the difference is, like, it's easy to say that cultivation should go to any hot country, but there's a reason why there's a lot of greenhouses that still exist in North America, and they're all over North America. And there's billion-dollar corporations planting vegetables in greenhouses in North America. So that's never going to go away. I do think there's an argument to be made on the import-export piece, but we're a ways away from that.
What do you mean, the argument about the import-export? What does that mean?
So there's a lot of talk of let's build in Uruguay, or let's build in Colombia or Thailand even, and we'll ship to industrialized countries such as the US and Canada and parts of Europe. For many of so we have a 3-prong approach, and one of the prongs is government. I mentioned that we talk to corporate as well. And when we talk to government, a lot of them do mention to us that anytime they're looking at legalizing this plant and creating a structure or regulation around it, they're looking to protect it, protect the industry. They want to keep jobs in the country. They want to keep the taxes in the country. So they wouldn't just be willing to let exported cannabis just come into the country at a very low cost and cause the industry that they just legalized to lose a bunch of jobs, but still keep that vice within the country.
I guess there's an argument to be made that is, in a way, the next version of prohibition, right?
Definitely, and that's you can see it like that.
There's a big conflict here. Okay, I'm looking at contradictions because I find contradictions sort of interesting, right? Yes, you got to protect things that are grown at home. And B, it's prohibition. It's prohibiting. Like, I want my Thai stick. I'd like it to come in and be reasonable. I'd like to be able to afford it.
I mean, you're seeing this all over the world as countries are going anti-fair trade, free trade, and coming into becoming more protectionist. I think no other country in the world is showing that as much as the U.S. is at this point in time with the current government that's in there. I'm not a big political guy, but I do know that protectionism is the flavor of the day. So you're seeing this all over the globe in different industries. And I mean, cannabis is no different than the automotive industry or the pharmaceutical industry.
Perhaps. I mean, I certainly can't speak to the policies of this particular harebrained government. I am a big politics guy. But let's talk about automation. Like, okay, so a lot of North American producers say, oh man, the minute we get automation in there, we're doing all these new amazing things. It's going to be the new square tomato, basically the tomato that was developed to be packed and not break and not burst, right? So that may be the case, but here's my question. Square tomatoes suck. I mean, they have no good flavor. Yes, they're produced. Yes, we can always have them, but nobody really wants them. We use them, of course, but they have no flavor. And I'm concerned that industrialized cannabis is going to be the square tomato.
Well, there's a bunch of ways I can unpack that on the automation side. So on the automation side and the plant science side, I think where we're at right now is truly cannabis 1.0. Like when you talk to the larger organizations, call it the Bayers and the Cortivas, these are giant plant science companies that touch every vegetable you can imagine. They look at the cannabis space and they just see how primitive it is. Nobody's really understanding the plant. Everyone's just planting it. And then there's two versions of it. One is mass producing the plant for mass consumption. Another one is creating craft cannabis, which is high THC, a lot of tender love and care TLC attached to creating the plant so that you get the best bang for your buck.
That's TLC, THC? Is that what you're saying?
That's a good way to put it, yes.
Why are they all so obsessed with high THC? I mean, I think a lot of people are like me. We want sort of low to middle THC. I want to be able to get through the movie and smoke the joint. What's the big deal?
I think it's all part of uneducated. Like the customer isn't educated enough to understand that a hybrid is actually the best thing you can get because it kills some of the hangover effect of cannabis, where you have the headache the next day, you feel groggy. If you get a hybrid, it solves a lot of that.
I mean, is anybody here? I'm going to go way off the topic here. Is anybody thinking of talking to people who are middle aged and beyond, who have some experience of cannabis, who just want it a little weaker because their bodies don't want to be smashed? Have you ever heard anybody talking about my generation? Ironically enough, even though all these old guys running these big companies are my generation, are they all chasing every fucking 20-year-old vice watcher?
I think they all understand it. Like they all get it. All these LPs understand that it's not the percentage of THC, but then they're viewing the consumer data and they're noticing that consumers are actually looking for what has the highest percentage of THC. I want to buy that. And it makes no sense to me because, again, the hybrid model is the model that wins. It is your generation, my generation as well. So
you're younger than me by a mile.
You look pretty young.
Thank you.
But the older generation is a flower smoker. The younger generation is a vape smoker. And there's a distinct difference when you look at the data between the two sets. And edibles kind of range across both sides of the border.
Yeah. Anyway, go back. I interrupted you. Please go back to this idea of automation, and we're at Cannabis 1.0. What's going to happen? What are we going to see that's going to really change the game for these producers in North America? And by the way, can any real grower today think they're going to, if this is happening, think that they're going to really be in business in 2 or 3 years without a shit ton of investment?
Yeah. So on the automation side, there's a number of LPs and MSOs, so licensed producers in Canada and multi-state operators in the US that believe they can drill down the cost of production per gram to about 30 cents a gram, and they're very confident in that, doing that in the short term. Now,
and it's currently at $3 a gram in the US?
It's currently at $3. You have some producers that are at that $2 mark, but they have this view that they're just learning how to do this. There's as you can imagine, with Canada's very high regulations, and even in California, there's a lot of crops that fail. So that failure actually goes into the cost of producing the cannabis that actually passes the test. It's similar to when you're buying an avocado at the store. The reason it costs $1 per avocado is because you're paying for the ones that never made it off the shelf and went bad. Same situation here. So the better they get at planting and understanding how to cultivate en masse, then the lower that cost can get, and the more economies of scale they can gain off of that.
And what technologies have you seen that you think are going to really expedite this process?
Yeah, so I'm going to plug one of our portfolio companies in.
If you're going to plug them, tell us you're plugging them, okay? Be shameless in your self-promotion, okay?
Definitely. So we partnered with Mastronardi Produce, which is Mastronardi Produce, which are the folks behind the Sunset brand of vegetables. So Sunset brand is one of the largest vegetable manufacturers in all of North America. They are selling Whole Foods, Ralph's, you name it, the store. They're in it in supermarket wise in both Canada and the US. And we went up to them. We saw how cultivation was taking place with a lot of cannabis connoisseurs who wanted to get into the space. And we thought, why not go find the number one greenhouse operator in North America and ask them if they want to get into the cannabis space. There's a bit of song and dance, but after quite some time, we struck a deal to create Farmhouse. And Farmhouse with a PH is the joint venture between Canopy Rivers and the Mastronardi Produce family. And we started off with a 1.3 million square foot facility, so 23 football fields. Based out of Leamington, Ontario, which is on the most southern point of Canada, which is, if you look at the map, it's parallel in terms of longitude to Northern California. So it's the same climate as both.
Wait, Ontario is at the same latitude as California?
Yeah, it dips a bit down, and that's the dip, right by Detroit. Wow. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I never would imagine that. Anyway, there you are. At 1.3 million acres?
Square feet.
Okay, square feet.
And the beauty of it is, they have a tomato greenhouse and multiple tomato and peppers and cucumbers. And the only time a human being touches your tomato before you buy it at Whole Foods is when it's picked off of the tree. The the trimming, the cleaning, the labeling, the packaging is all done through machines and not robotics. So when they walked into a typical grow on the cannabis side, they were astounded by the amount of manual labor that takes to trim it, to dry it, to package it, to label it, etc. And they said they could just do that all with robots.
So here's the war coming as I see it, okay? It's the robots versus the small farmers, right? I'm talking about the Thai, Chinese, Laotian, all these people in Asia or Central America, South America who are beginning, or who are actually not beginning, who are continuing their very long heritage of growing this plant, right? And it seems like that's where we're heading. The robots in North America doing all this efficiency, and the heritage growers. I think I know what I prefer intellectually anyway.
What's that?
The heritage artisanal grower with all this history behind them and these land-raised strains that have not been hybridized and sort of muddied in a way because they've been so crossbred throughout the years.
I mean, that's true. And I think I'm on the same boat as that, just because we are fans of cannabis in the plant. But if you look at the general population and you break them down between consumers, intenders, and rejectors, you'll notice that many of those, a lot of intenders and rejectors, majority of them, but a good chunk of consumers as well, just want to smoke weed, just want to ingest it. They don't care how much THC is in it. They don't care what it smells like. They don't want to look at the crystals. All they want to do is consume the product.
So we're having beer, basically, aren't we? This is beer. This is not really necessarily wine as far as I can see, but it's definitely beer. And you're basically saying that really most people want Coors or PBR. And the other ones are going to be, 10, 15% of the market. But the vast 85% is going to be PBR.
Absolutely. Budweiser isn't the best beer on the market, yet it's one of the top selling beers. And it's going to be the same case for the cannabis consumer.
So it's going to be buying on price.
Buying on price and buying on availability. I always say that the reason why Coke and Pepsi isn't because of the marketing or the dollars they spent on those funky Christmas commercials, but it's because every store you walk into, whether it's a quick service restaurant, fast food chain, or convenience store, has a Coke and Pepsi machine there.
Yeah, it's just ubiquitous for better or worse. All right, so you're really depressing me. So let's get on to another really interesting and potentially depressing topic, which is biosynthetics. Okay, now I want to just explain in case you haven't heard some of the previous podcasts. So biosynthetics is really genetic modification of certain products to create other products. And the way they do this with cannabis is they manipulate the genes in yeast, I believe, or some are looking at algae. And it gives off a byproduct, which is called a cannabinoid. And the cannabinoid, it's a synthetically produced cannabinoid. And if you're able to get the cost of a gram of cannabis down to, what did you say, 30 cents, they're going to be able to get it down to 0.30 cents, okay? Because this is something that once it happens, it can be done at scale. And I've done consulting to one biosynthetic company, not in the cannabis space, but I do understand that the science is accelerating really quickly. Like the chief science officers told me there that, it took them 10 years to get to where they are today, but in the next 4 years, it's going to the technology and the science is going to increase exponentially. So it's a geometric progression, not an arithmetic progression. So this is quite an interesting field, and there's a lot of buzz around it, blah, 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 blah. So it seems to me that another threat to all growers of cannabis in Thailand or North America is this idea of biosynthesized cannabinoids. How do you look at that? Another potential, I'm looking at the wars here. How do you look at that war between cannabis that's actually grown and cannabis that is potentially just synthesized from other products?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd start off by saying that any industry...
Very long question.
It's going to be a very long answer. Anytime you look at an industry like cannabis where there's money to be made, if you do create it on a synthetic version of it, there's going to be exponential growth because there's money tossed after money trying to go after this to solving the same problem. I find that in the biosynthetic world, there's still a lot to be done. They can create CBD biosynthetically using algae, bacteria, or yeast. However, it's going to take about another 18 to 24 months to actually do it properly and stably. And then it's going to take another 3 years to mass market and create it at a cost that actually competes with dry flower.
I just want to add that the FDA allows it to be called natural because you're not genetically modifying the thing. You're genetically modifying the yeast or the algae, and the output of that is a quote unquote natural product as designed by the FDA. So this is what I find really potentially fascinating also, is that you can have biosynthesized cannabinoids that are going to be called natural.
Absolutely. Even when you pick up a typical consumer packaged good or CPG product, you'll see that they have extracts in them, and some of these extracts are created through biosynthesis. So I think on the Thai Stick show, you were mentioning vanilla beans and how vanilla beans were biosynthesized. Same thing happens with willow trees when they're creating aspirin. So aspirin was made from, I think it was the bark of a willow tree, birch. Okay. And you're not seeing any cultivation of that. So definitely that's going to take place. It is a race to do that. So we've talked to some of the largest food ingredient manufacturers in the world, and they're starting to line themselves up for the cannabis, CBD and THC. They think they can do better than many other players out there. We've canvassed, I don't call it 24 companies within the space that are pure play cannabis biosynthetic companies. And we've seen some really cool things. That there's companies out there that have learned how to take the molecule of THC and make it 5 times more psychoactive through biosynthesis, or take out all psychoactivity altogether. So you're just left with the therapeutical effect of it. And these are game changers. You see them in dozens of different markets out there. But at the end of the day, there's still going to be a huge market for the dry flower and full spectrum organic method of, I call it organic, but it's not necessarily organic, of actually creating cannabis products.
So I sort of think of biosynthetically produced cannabinoids like vitamins. Like, I have no idea, frankly. I mean, I'm a pretty conscious consumer, but I really don't know where my vitamins come from. Do you know where yours come from?
Same place, from a lab, right? Yeah.
Always. They always come from a lab, right?
Absolutely. And on the biosynthesis side, what they'll do is they'll take algae and they'll modify it so that it produces cannabinoids, and they'll send an enzyme in to kill off everything else except the cannabinoids. So all you're left is with your CBD or CBG or CBN or THC, name the cannabinoid that they can produce. And that's going to be a market. And that needs to be a market for the pharmaceutical industry, because right now what you're seeing is a lot of genetic drift. And this is going back to my conversation of why cannabis cultivation is at 1.0. Anytime you're planting the same strain, you're actually getting different results, because every plant is different. So you have your mother plant, you cut some clones, you create them. You can't really clone a clone too many times, or else what happens is the genetics start to drift off. There's cultivation out there that has created virtually no genetic drift through different methods, but it's not a mass-produced way of cultivating. It's more so for the premium products. You can't use that type of genetic drift product in pharmaceutical ingredients where they're expecting a stable product for a drug. So what the biosynthetic world will do is create those ingredients. We call them active pharmaceutical ingredients, or APIs, for the pharmaceutical world specifically, and it'll fall into a bit of consumer packaged goods as well.
It's very fascinating to picture this or imagine this. Now, where does the entourage effect come in? Here's another one of my predictions, is that scientists are going to try to debunk this idea of the entourage effect, which means that all of the various 120, 140, however many active compounds they're currently counting in cannabis, the entourage effect means they work together synergistically, and they sort of amplify each other, and that's how you get these incredible both highs and healings. What do you think is going to happen to that? Is it going to go the way of the dodo bird as soon as biosynthetics come on board?
Definitely not. I think that there's a huge market for full spectrum, because it gives you that entourage effect. We don't understand the entourage effect yet, and this isn't something that humans solve. This is something that computers solve. So there's research labs. One of the third prong of our 3-prong approach is talking to academics. There's research labs that are trying to collect all the strains and test them out to see how the entourage effect works. And when you're talking about hundreds of terpenes and hundreds of cannabinoids and how you mix those together, it becomes a computer problem where you're going to have multiple instances of one cannabinoid, 2 terpenes, or 3 cannabinoids and 4 terpenes. And that optimization problem is best solved through machine learning. So you're going to see a big portion of artificial intelligence take place. A lot of the research we're seeing on that side is coming from Israel, which has been very early on the cannabinoid research side of things. And that's going to really not debunk it, but it's going to actually teach us what the entourage effect really means. So that down the road, you're going to have personalized medicine for yourself. So you're going to be, say, you're going to need to type something out for a podcast or for your next book, and you're going to need to concentrate on something. They're going to take your genetics, they're going to take the what they know about the entourage effect, and they're going to prescribe you the perfect vial for what you need to do to work on your next book, to concentrate on it without the side effects that your genes might produce.
That really is the promise. But it's just never going to be, okay? Because writing books defies cannabinoids. Are you invested in any of these biosynthetic companies?
Quite frankly, no. There's just too much of a timeline involved into getting to mass production, and that which means that there's probably going to be a whole slew of companies that come in that you've never met before. So before we make our bet, we just need to see things play out a bit, see what the first company is to really nail the biosynthetic theory piece before going into that scalability of it, and then we'll jump in. But we're keeping a very close eye on it because I think you and I agree that it's inevitable. It's just a matter of time.
I'm sure people in your sphere, in the high-flying world of venture capital, are watching this. What about the general industry? Are they aware of this sort of technical and scientific development of biosynthetics?
I don't think so. I think they're more involved on the branding side. So these are two distinct theses that we have. I think on the branding side, you're going to see a lot of products come out. They're probably not going to have the best cannabinoids or cannabis in it, but they're going to have the best branding in it. And that just, again, goes to our discussion before that Budweiser isn't the best beer on the market, yet it's sold the most. And I think you're going to see the same thing on the cannabis side.
Because you're privileged and you get behind the doors of these works in progress, really. So I know about yeast and I know about algae, and I've seen the enormous amount of machinery and computers that are involved in creating these biosynthetic products. This is not something that happens in a test tube. This is a major technical enterprise. What else have you seen that's interesting in the biosynthetics world that sort of go, wow, I never thought of that, or I never thought that would be possible?
I think what you're seeing a lot is companies that are focusing on other cannabinoids, which you can't readily find in cannabis, or it takes a lot of cannabis to synthesize that. They're creating those in the lab. So these are cannabinoids that aren't found in the natural world that they're creating in the lab, and they're trying to create this for a different market without knowing what the therapeutic effects are. So time will tell how that plays out. I hope we don't go down the path of plain synthesis, which is the synthetic THC that you get from the store, because that's a bad way of doing it.
It's also, nobody's ever liked it. I mean, we've had Marinol on the market for 40 years. They even made it a Schedule 3 drug when it came out to sort of spur the price. But nobody ever liked it. It's a miserable experience. You ever tried it? I have. It's like a real bummer. It is really a drag. But when you say these other cannabinoids, are you talking about, I mean, the one that, of course, has captivated my mind is THCV, which is an appetite suppressant. Is that the kind of other cannabinoids you're talking about?
Yes, exactly. We haven't really found strains that produce that much THCV. So we're going to have to lean on the labs to do that. That's one of the benefits of having biosynthesis. Sure, it might cannibalize some of the cultivation that's out there, but at the end of the day, it creates a whole slew of products we've never seen before.
I think there are growers. I think Ethan Russo is leading a project. I have to talk with him about it in the Czech Republic to grow strains that are high in sort of what are called the minor cannabinoids, THCV, CBN, blah, 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 all the other ones. I was in California a couple of months ago, and I bought something called Doug's Varan. Have you tried Doug's Varan?
No, what is that?
It's a grower, Doug somebody, or Mr. Varan. I can't remember. That's not Mr. Varan. It's Doug somebody who's grown a high THCV strain. And I believe one pre-roll was maybe $20, and it was only in one dispensary. It was in Spark. But boy, I brought it to a party one night, and let me tell you that every woman in the room and some men really wanted to try that appetite suppress. That's how I build it, as an appetite suppress, like the weed version of a diet supplement. And it was extremely popular. It wasn't a very extremely interesting high. I didn't have much of an experience off of it all, and I did manage to eat dinner. But apparently, it's the strongest you can grow.
Joe, this is what I love about this industry, is that the capital markets might be telling you that we might have hit an inflection point in terms of these companies are too big. But yeah, we haven't really understood the plant at all. If what you're saying is true, and THCV does do that, and I've heard the same thing anecdotally as well, there's a huge weight loss market that you're attacking. Like if you look at what pharma, the size of pharma, tobacco, alcohol, spirits, you name it, you take the top three players, the market caps of the top three players, and you mash them together, you're getting anywhere from $200 billion to about $600 billion. On the cannabis side, it's about $30 billion. So in effect, there's about a 20x potential of how this industry needs to grow. And last I checked, the alcohol industry does not touch the pharma industry. And the pharma industry doesn't touch the CPG industry. So you have a plant that can cross-pollinate, no pun intended, to go into these different industries.
Who are we going to get to fund this podcast? That's the question. With all these billions of dollars, we need to find somebody to fund our little podcast so we can keep these kind of conversations going. I think you're really interesting. What else? I mean, in a way, you're really privileged because you really get to see things before they happen. I know you have to make a decision with people's billions of dollars on whether you're going to do something with them. Do you ever have trouble sleeping at night?
Absolutely. I mean, the pace of this business is uncanny. Coming from the tech world, the largest technology VC fund in Canada, we were looking at a deal or two a day. Right now, our team is looking at 6 to 7 pitches per person. So 6 to 7 times half an hour, half your day is spent on the phone talking to startups. We've seen over the last 365 days, 1,523 pitches all over the world. Companies from all from all different places, all walks of life, entrepreneurs that are coming in trying to capitalize on this revolutionary plant that has been prohibited for a century, but has been in use for 8,000 years before Christ. So it's quite a wild ride, and this industry moves so fast. We say typically that every 3 months feels like a year of human time. So we're definitely living in dog years.
Okay, so I'm now asking every guest on the podcast this question, which is, what was the last interesting, surprising, unexpected thought, action, feeling you had while using cannabis?
Ooh, that's one that I'm gonna have to think through. I find that certain strains really bring out the creativity, and there's times where there's certain strains that I really save for deep into the night, where I'm trying to create a structure for a deal or trying to understand where to take things next. And it really opens your mind for creativity. So I take a blank piece of legal-sized paper and a pen and a light overhead of me, and I just write. And I just draw, I call them sticks and circles, where you're just drawing diagrams of how you think things are going to play out and how the future is going to play out. And the next day you look at it, some of the stuff you don't understand, but there's a lot of creativity that comes out of it. I don't know a single plant that or anything that opens your mind up as much as that does, or I haven't tried it, nor am I willing to try it, because quite frankly, cannabis has no side effects.
Can you give me a concrete example? So one of the thoughts I had while writing Brave New Weed is that there's some sort of response where sort of areas of the brain get muddled, or some of the pathways crisscross. So things that don't normally come together or make sense do come together and make sense. And it's sort of like any creative process, I think, is like that. Painting or writing, sometimes, a metaphor is actually two things that don't make any sense come together, right? And I think there's something in that theory of how cannabis allows thoughts that were never formally put together to come together in a new way. So did you have anything like that? That was a really bad explanation of what I'm talking about, but can you give me an example?
I think Jack Herer is my go-to strain, and Jack Herer really gets the mind going. And there's been times where you consume it, and I start thinking through what the different incentives are for different people within a deal that I'm looking at, or the structure that I'm looking at, why they're so focused on certain points where I just passed by it normally, but you really zone into it. And it's just uncanny. It's black and white in terms of how that feeling is when you do get that spark of creativity. But likewise, there's a lot of times where you just go down the complete wrong path, and you're looking at Vince McMahon videos on YouTube for some reason, and you go down this wrong path on Wikipedia, and you spend all your time learning trivial information.
That sounds about right. Narbe Alexandrian, I want to thank you for A, reaching out, and B, coming and speaking so honestly with us. It's been great to have you, and I hope we have more of you again.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine.
I'm so glad.
Joe and I will continue to publish every episode of the Brave New Weed podcast for free for you, our listeners. But we could always use your support. If you've got a little extra change rattling around in your pocket, you can cruise over to patreon.com/bravenewweed and become a supporter of the show. Everything that you'd pledge to support helps us to increase the guests that we can have on the show, even eventually the frequency of the show. And we have a great set of rewards out there, including copies of Joe's book, invites to special events that we will do in New York City, all sorts of fun things. So if you're enjoying the podcast and you would like to support us, visit patreon.com/bravenewweed today. Joe, I always really enjoy hearing your conversations with these people who are sort of in the money and business side of this, because I think that it's a nice and it's a breath of fresh air from, the people who are, how would you say, high inside the box, maybe? Because he's not your typical cannabis grower or product manufacturer. This is a guy that looks at the whole thing from a completely different perspective. And I always find that fascinating.
Yeah. And he's got a great perspective. And I love this idea of robots versus farmers, the next cannabis war. I mean, he's able to talk about this with me. We may not disagree we may not agree on everything, but he is a smart guy who's really seeing the future. And I'm so honored that he would, come on to the show and talk about this stuff with us. I'm also happy that he talks about being a user, frankly, because I think it's important to help keep breaking the stigma down. I mean, yes, some guy who runs a whole huge venture fund uses cannabis, and guess what? Lots of people do. And I just think we have to, especially people running big funds, as Narbe said, they have to know their product. And it's so true. Can you imagine the head of a wine company saying, "I'm sorry, I don't drink"?
Right.
It would undercut every ounce of credibility. So I'm really happy that he's, straightforward, honest. He's the real deal, which is great. I want to remind listeners that the reason we were able to bring you this fantastic podcast is thanks to Firefly 2 vaporizers. They have created a next generation product that vaporizes flower in one of the best, most efficient ways I've ever used. It delivers fantastic flavor, and it delivers it in a device that is quality material with quality technology that really seems to work every single time. So I really want to encourage you to go to theflyerfly.com, use the promo code BRAVE, BRAVE, and if you're interested in the Firefly 2 Plus, please redeem that product for a 20% discount.
Hey, if you want to know more about the product and more about Firefly, the company in general, you can also go back a handful of episodes and find our interview with CEO of Firefly Vaporizers when he came and visited us on the show and actually gave us a rundown of exactly how to use the device.
Yeah, that's Mark Williams, and another wonderful man in the cannabis space, which is great. I mean, we're seeing the good guys a lot here, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Matthew, it's great. I know. So listen, thanks for joining me again. See you in a couple of weeks when we do the next one, okay?
Happy as always, Joe, to be on the show. And I would like to remind listeners out there that you can find, like, and share the Brave New Weed podcast on all social media. We're on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, New Pandora podcast platform. Anywhere that you listen to podcasts, you can like and comment and review. We'd really love to hear your reviews. They help people. They help new people find the show. And then the other thing you can do is you can share the show on Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram, on any of those social media platforms that get us a little bit deeper reach out to some new people who might really benefit from high-minded, scientific, medically based conversations about cannabis like we have on this show. And we thank you all very, very much for listening.
Thanks, Matthew. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Brave New Weed podcast. This episode and all future episodes are made possible by amazing listeners like yourself. If you like what you've heard, we encourage you to show your support by giving $1 a month for special access and rewards on patreon.com/bravenewweed. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram via @bravenewweed. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/bravenewweed. And remember, you can always find more information about us or information discussed in each episode by pointing your favorite browser to bravenewweed.com.